Welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. Today we want to look back on what has been a tumultuous year in international politics. Welcome, Robert.
Good morning, Bruce.
In January, you said that the key challenges that New Zealand would be facing this coming year was the global environmental challenge, getting caught in a diplomatic squeeze between the United States and China, and the crumbling international rules-based system. How well have we gone with each of those challenges?
Well, not very well. We haven't managed them. Indeed, we haven't really addressed them. So I'm afraid it's been, in terms of those three problems you've identified, a little bit of a depressing year. If you take the environmental challenge, we have seen, as always, there are some bright spots, and the bright spot has been the emergence, I think, of a young people's movement advocating climate change, led by Greta Thunberg. But at the moment, there doesn't seem to be enough substantive action, and there's, I think, growing anger amongst young people. It's interesting, a colleague of mine was recently speaking to a class of students at Otago University, and asked them about their views of the future, and about half of them said they couldn't conceivably have children. They couldn't conceive of themselves having children in the future because the uncertainties regarding the state of the world, in particular climate. So that's a little bit of a sobering observation. So, and with respect to the second problem, it was the crumbling internet, the rules-based system. We learned just in the last 24 hours that the WTO ruling body will effectively, the WTO was set up in 1995 to establish rules for trade, and that system has benefited New Zealand enormously. It seems to be breaking down because the United States the last 2 years has been blocking new appointments to the appellate body that makes the key decisions, and so from now on that body, it has been paralysed for the last 2 years, but it will now cease to function effectively in the near future. So we could be moving to a situation which the Trump administration wants, where economic relations are based on power rather than rules. Again, big implications for the majority of countries in the international system, which are small or medium sized. And in light of that, I think, there's not too much room for optimism in light of some of the problems we've identified.
What about the whole issue of getting caught in the diplomatic squeeze between the United States and China? Has that happened, and how have we gone?
We have been affected, and several companies in New Zealand have gone bankrupt because of that. They've gone out of business. As we said in a previous interview, trade relations between the United States and China are not just a bilateral affair. They involve global supply chains, which involve up to 14 or 15 intermediary countries which form part of the chain. We're not too exposed compared with others. Japan's much more exposed, for example, and some members of the European Union are much more exposed to the rising trade tensions. But in a sense, the problem between the United States and China highlights the need for an authoritative trade organisation, and it's at this very time that the WTO is wilting. Not least because of some of the measures taken by the Trump administration, which has a vision of a world in which America first, in Mr. Trump's terms, in which rules take second place to power.
What surprised you this year?
I think what surprised me was the thing that many of us dreaded actually happened on the 15th of March of this year, when we had an appalling terrorist attack in Christchurch by a white supremacist, which killed 51 people. That was a real surprise in the sense that although many of us have believed that New Zealand wasn't immune from the trends which affect many other parts of the world, we certainly are not. Increasingly, the international environment and its problems will impact on New Zealand whether we like it or dislike it, but it will happen. But I think the problem of white nationalism really came home, and we're waiting the findings, of course, from the Royal Commission into this whole investigation into the circumstances in which this occurred, and so it'd be premature to comment too much. But it would appear that the chief perpetrator who is an Australian, was part of a global network. This was not some sort of lone nut vengeance attack against a particular community. It would appear to be orchestrated, and the fact that the chief perpetrator wore GoPro technology and the video was almost as intended, was out on the internet very quickly, this appalling video, it shows that in a sense we have, been caught up in this, and I think the government has acted with a fair degree of credibility. It's tried to abolish automatic weapons in New Zealand. It's in the process of doing that. It's also now constrained foreign donations to political parties. And in addition, it's launched the Christchurch Call, which I think is a very commendable initiative to curb online extremism. But we do need international support to carry through those measures. And what was conspicuous about the first meeting which launched the Christchurch Call in Paris, and remember the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern worked closely with President Macron on this. Most of the developing countries are there, but conspicuous by their absence was the United States, led by the Trump administration.
What are you most concerned about at the close of 2019?
I remain deeply concerned about climate change because I think human beings often assume that they can dictate the pace of change, but in this area they cannot. And so we could be confronted with a situation in a relatively short period of time where the effects of rising global temperatures confounds us, and we are already seeing symptoms of this developing. So I think climate change is the number one global problem that we face collectively, but it does highlight another problem, and that is that at the moment things look like they're going to get worse before they get better. And the reason I say that is because we have not yet got the mechanisms in place to deal with problems that do not respect territorial boundaries. If you think about it, Bruce, many of the problems that New Zealand and other states face, whether they be environmental, whether they be economic, or whether they be security problems of national security, very few of those problems can be solved unilaterally or by states acting alone. And at the moment, we're in the process of actually emasculating international institutions rather than boosting them. So there's a bit of a mismatch at the moment between the problems we face and the means that we have to address those problems. And unless we, I think, become much more realistic about the ability of international cooperation to solve these problems, because states can't do it on their own, then it's difficult to see how these problems, such as climate change, can be effectively addressed in the near future.
Thank you, Robert, for all your input and your insight this year.
Thanks, Bruce. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for watching. Catch us next year on Global Insight. Mā te wā.